892 points. 609 comments. In the 72 hours to the moment I pulled the numbers, 5 stories on the whole of Hacker News drew more comments than this one. Exactly one of those 5 was about artificial intelligence. The headline read, CEO fired developers to make room for AI. Developers create open source AI CEO. It is a perfect story. Workers thrown out by a machine building a machine to throw out the boss. Turnabout. 428 people turned up to argue about it. Now here is one number for you to hold on to for the next half hour, because everything I am about to show you turns on it. Of those 609 comments, the number that mention anything at all about the software under discussion, the code, the repository, the models, the license, is 14. What? And the number written by somebody who says they cloned it, installed it, or read it. 0. So I went and did that instead. I read the repository, I read the company's website, I pulled the commit log, the account records, and every timestamp I could get. What is down there is not a revenge project by fired engineers. What is it then, and why did 428 people, some of the most skeptical readers you will find anywhere, not need to know? Stay with me, because by the end of this you are going to recognize the mechanism. You have almost certainly been on the receiving end of it this week. Chapter 1: The Story That Traveled. The headline runs to 14 words, and every one of them is working. CDO fired developers to make room for AI. Developers create open source AI CDO. Read it again and notice the shape. 2 sentences, a crime then a punishment. There is no argument in it anywhere, it is a plot. It went up at 1:46 in the morning, Universal Time, on the 27th of August, 2026. The link pointed at a GitHub repository called Open Executive, owned by an organization called Sente Labs AI. And attached to it, posted in the same second by the same account, was a comment. It sat at the top of the thread all day, which on that site means almost everybody read it before they read anything else. Here it is in full. A team of software developers were recently let go so a company could replace them with AI. So they got together and created an open-source AI CEO to replace the CEO and other executives. Hopefully, turnabout is fair play. And this might even get some folks to think twice about using AI to replace people. Count the load-bearing facts in that paragraph. A team was let go, a company did the letting go. The reason was AI, the same team then built this. The motive was retaliation. 5 factual claims, now count the sources. There are nones. No company is named, no date, no filing, no news report, no layoff notice, no severance letter, no state notification, nothing you could look up. And that is not a gap you have to go hunting for, it is the whole first sentence. Here is what I keep coming back to. That comment is written entirely in the third person. A team, they, them. It reads like a stranger reporting something he came across. Someone who found this in the wild and thought you would enjoy it. 2.5 hours later, the same account wrote something rather different. We will come to that. For now, sit with how well the framing works, because it is genuinely good work. It does not ask you to evaluate a piece of software. It asks you to enjoy a reversal. And reversals do not require evidence, they require symmetry. The boss used the machine on them. Now they use the machine on the boss. You already know how you feel about that before you know a single thing about the machine. Ask yourself honestly, did you need the details? Or had you picked a side by the end of the second sentence? I had. That is not a criticism of you. It is a description of what a good frame does to anyone, including the person making this video. And the numbers show exactly that. Of the 609 comments, 178 mention a CEO, 31 argue about whether a company can legally be run by software, 14 mention the software. Look at the ratio, 12-1 in favor of arguing about the premise. The premise was never checked, it was enjoyed. Now none of this proves the layoff did not happen. I want to be very careful about that, and I will keep being careful about it for the next half hour, because it is the difference between this video and the thing it is criticizing. The layoff may be completely real. Teams are being cut for exactly this reason right now, all over the industry. It is one of the most plausible sentences anybody could have written in August 2026. Plausible is the problem, plausible is what stops you looking. And notice how the burden gets quietly reversed here. If you doubt the story, you are the one who has to go and prove a negative. If you believe it, you have to do nothing at all. That asymmetry is worth more than any argument the poster could have made. He did not have to convince you of anything. He only had to make disbelief expensive. So let us pay that cost, what is actually in the repository. Chapter 2: What is actually in the repository? Open Executive is real software. That matters, and I want to say it before anything else. It is not a joke repository. It is not a stunt. It is not a landing page with a waiting list on it. It is about 3 megabytes of repository, Python and TypeScript, under an Apache 2.0 license, which is about as permissive as open source gets. I read the license file. It is the real Apache text, not a badge with nothing behind it. There is a fast API backend. There is a Next.js front end. There is a vector database for retrieval, a SQLite store for what the system remembers between sessions, a background job runner, and connectors for Slack, email, Telegram, Google Chat, and Discord. At the time I looked, it had 1,400 stars, 88 forks, and 14 open issues. The demo host the README points that was up. It returned a page rather than an error. So real thing, if you clone it, something runs. Hold that in mind, because a lot of what follows is critical and none of it is about the quality of the code. Now read what it says it is. Its own one-line description reads, an AI-powered virtual executive team. A single coherent executive persona backed by 8 specialist Claude agents. 8 specialists. A chief strategy officer, a chief financial officer, a head of people, a general counsel, a chief operating officer, a chief marketing officer, a chief product officer, and a board communications director. 1 orchestrator on top of them so that whoever is asking gets 1 voice back rather than 8. Does that sound to you like a weapon pointed at a boardroom? Read the company's own website and it stops sounding like one entirely. Sente Labs describes itself as an R&D lab for multi-agent AI. It sells engagements. Book a working session, invent with us. We find the leverage, then build bespoke in your stack. Or deploy our open tools with support from the people who wrote the code. That is the Red Hat model, and it is a perfectly respectable business. Give the software away, sell the expertise. But now read how the product is pitched to the buyer, because this is the part that stopped me. Work happens around the clock. Leadership doesn't scale with it. Decisions queue, seats sit unfilled, and your best people spend their days chasing status. Who is that written for? Not for a fired developer. That is written for an executive who feels overstretched. Seats sit unfilled. The complaint is not that there are too many managers. The complaint is that there are not enough of them. And then there is one more line on that page, 4 words long, and I would like you to hold it directly against the headline. The judgment calls stay human. The product in its own marketing explicitly does not replace the executive. It briefs him. It watches competitors and filings overnight, drafts proposals, and hands him things to approve, edit, or dismiss. The website calls it a morning brief. So set the 2 sentences next to each other. The headline said, developers create open source AI CEO to replace the CEO and other executives. The product says the judgment calls stay human. Those are not the same claim, they are close to opposite claims. Which one got 892 points, and which one is on the website of the company that made it? Think about who would buy this thing. Picture the actual purchase. A chief executive or a founder running 3 companies reads a page promising that his overnight signals arrive triaged into decisions he can approve or dismiss, and he expenses it. Now picture the version in the headline. Who buys that? A board that wants to fire itself. There is no customer for the story. There is an obvious customer for the product. And when the story and the product point at different buyers, the one on the invoice is usually the real one. I should be fair here, and there is a real defense. In the thread, the submitter did say the thing can be configured to replace any management role, and pointed at the goal being to do for management what Copilot and Cursor did for development. So the ambition is genuinely there. But notice what that defense concedes. Copilot did not replace developers. It sat next to them. If the honest analogy is Copilot, then the honest headline is not that anyone got replaced. None of that is a scandal on its own. Companies pitch 2 ways to 2 audiences all the time. What makes it worth half an hour is the sequence. What was built when and in what order it reached you, so let us put a clock on it. Chapter 3: 8 hours in August. Every claim in this chapter comes from a timestamp you can pull yourself in about 30 seconds, from two public interfaces that need no login, no key, and no permission. If you want to check me on any of it, you can, and I would rather you did. Start with the repository because it did not appear last week. Open Executive was created on the 11th of June, 2026, 2.5 months before the headline reached anyone. The organization that owns it was registered 4 hours earlier the same afternoon. Its very first commit is worth pausing on. The message reads, Initial Public Release. The author field reads Claude at noreply at anthropic.com. So the initial public release of the open source AI CEO was, by its own commit metadata, written by an AI. Nobody in 609 comments noticed that, and honestly, it is the single funniest fact in this entire story. Now watch the shape of the work. There are 16 commits on the main branch, total, 1 in June, 11 across the 30th of June to the 3rd of July. Then the repository goes quiet for 53 days. Nothing on the 4th of July, nothing in the whole of August until the 26th. And what happens on the 26th? 4 commits between 5:51 and 6:03 in the evening Universal Time. All 4 of them do the same thing. They add a demo video link to the README and then correct it. 6 days before that, on the 20th of August, a 4-minute and 11-second video went up on YouTube from a channel called Sente Labs AI, titled Open Executive Demo, August 2026. Now keep the clock running because the next part happens fast. 3 hours and 52 minutes after that final README commit, at 9:55 and 56 seconds in the evening, a Hacker News account called Grumpy Guy is created. It does not exist before this moment. 66 seconds later, 1 minute and 6 seconds, that brand new account posts its first comment, not on this story, on an unrelated popular thread about GitHub outages, a short, agreeable, forgettable remark. Then 3 hours and 49 minutes after that, at 1:46 in the morning, the account submits the story. Let me lay that out end to end, because written down it is one evening's work. Demo video 20th of August. README updated to point at it 26th of August 6 in the evening, account created 10 at night, warm-up comment 1 minute later, submission 1:45 in the morning. 7 hours and 43 minutes from the last commit to the front page. Now what would you call that sequence? Because there is a word for it and the word is not discovery. Run it against your own experience for a moment. When you have shipped something and wanted people to see it, what did the last day before launch look like? A demo recorded, a README tidied, a link double-checked because you got it wrong the first time. That is not sinister. That is every launch you have ever done. It is only strange when it arrives dressed as news about a stranger. Here is the accounting on that account, and it is short. At the moment I checked it, Grumpy Guy had existed for 20 hours. Its entire public history was the 6 items. 1 story, 5 comments, 4 of the 5 were in this thread. It had never submitted anything else. Not once ever. I want to be scrupulous about what this does and does not establish. It does not establish that the layoff is false. It does not establish who this person is. And creating an account to post something is not by itself wrong. People do it every day, often for perfectly good reasons like not wanting a launch attached to their main identity. What it does establish is the order of events. The artifact was 2.5 months old and dormant. The video came first. The README was pointed at the video. The account was made, the story went up. That is a launch, and a launch is a completely legitimate thing to run. The question is what it was wearing when it arrived. Because at 1:46 in the morning, the thing that reached 428 people was not a launch. It was a report about somebody else's misfortune. And you were not told otherwise, not hidden from. Told nothing, which is a different thing, and in a thread moving this fast it works better. So when did that change, and did anyone push? Chapter 4, the one person who asked. 43 minutes into the thread, a user called CactusPlant7374 wrote one sentence. What company fired them? I don't see that in the repo, but maybe I missed it. That is it, that is the whole comment. 20 words, no accusation in them, with a polite escape hatch built into the end. Maybe I missed it. It is exactly the right question. It is the only question that would settle the entire premise. It received 0 replies. What? Not a hostile reply, not a dismissive one, nothing. In a thread that produced 609 comments over the following day, that question sat there and nobody, including the person who could have answered it in 4 words, came back to it. And the company is still not named. Not in the thread, not in the repository, not on the company website, not anywhere I could find. Now, an hour and 48 minutes after that question went unanswered, the same account that posted the story posted something new. And this is the moment the story quietly turns. At 17 minutes past 4 in the morning, in reply to a completely different comment, deep inside a subthread, Grumpy Side Guy wrote this. Op here, team was let go, decided to do a startup. We thought that tools like Copilot and Claude Code were transforming development. We wanted to transform management, not just CEOs. We open sourced this knowing that if people find this useful, and we hope they do, we can get support work out of it, similar to the Red Hat model and other open source tech. Read the pronouns. We thought, we wanted, we open sourced, we can get support work out of it. 2.5 hours after posting a story about what happened to some other team, the poster says, it is us. We built this. We are selling support for it. So he did disclose. I want that on the record plainly, and I want to give it full weight. It was unprompted. Nobody had cornered him. He volunteered it. But look at where the two statements sit relative to each other. The framing, a team they them turnabout is fair play, is the top comment of the thread, posted in the same second as the link, seen by essentially everyone. The disclosure is a reply to a reply 2.5 hours later, at 4 in the morning, under a subthread most readers will never scroll to. And in between those two things, there is a third comment I keep rereading. 8 minutes into the thread, a reader asked a completely straightforward question. Is this automated CEO any good? 25 minutes in, the account answered. Highly configurable. Looks like. It is targeted at any level of management, the key features. Seems that it can generate its own vision. Looks like seems. That is the founder of the company describing his own product, as though he were guessing from the outside, as if he were reading the README for the first time, along with everybody else. Was that a deliberate performance? I do not know, and I am not going to pretend I do. At 4 in the morning people write loosely, and hedging language is a habit, not a confession. But it is the same voice as the top comment, and the top comment is what carried the thing. Here is the thing about a disclosure that arrives 2.5 hours late, and it has nothing to do with anyone's honesty. By 4 in the morning, the story had already been read by most of the people who were ever going to read it. The votes were already cast. The frame was already set. You cannot unring that. The correction never catches the claim, it never does. So what were all those people doing for 2.5 hours? What exactly was the conversation? Chapter 5, what 428 people argued about. I ran the whole thread through a counter. 609 comments, 598 of them carrying text from 428 separate accounts. Here is what those people spent a day discussing. 178 comments, nearly 3 in 10s, mention a CEO. 31 argue about the law. Can a company have a non-human officer? Who signs the contract? Who goes to prison when it goes wrong? One person points out that corporate officers are generally required to be what lawyers call natural persons. Someone answers, hire an intern to prompt it. Someone else answers that the intern is then holding the bag. It is a good argument, genuinely. People are being sharp and funny and citing actual statutes. 18 comments, 3%, mention the firing at all, the thing the headline is about. And 14 comments, mention anything whatsoever about the software. The database, the framework, the license, the models, the code, the README, the install. 14 out of 598. Then there is the number I opened with, and it is the one that ought to bother you most. I searched for anyone saying they had cloned it, installed it, deployed it, run it, or even read the source. Any phrasing at all. 0. Not one person in 428 said they had opened the thing. The demo host was serving the whole time. I checked. The repository has a quick start that is 4 commands long: clone, change directory, copy the environment file, run make. And in an entire day, on a website whose whole identity is people who read the code, nobody reported reading the code. Do you see what that means about what was actually being consumed? It was not a piece of software. It was a story about a firing with a link attached as evidence that the story was true. The link was never evidence of anything. It was a repository page. It said nothing about a layoff, but a link at the top of a post does a strange thing to a reader. It feels like sourcing. It has the shape of a citation. It sits exactly where a citation sits. And so 428 people treated a description of a product as the documentation of an event. Now, is this a failure of those 428 people? I do not think it is entirely, and this is where I part company with the easy version of this argument. Nobody owes a comment thread a fact check. People were arguing about whether machines can hold authority, and that is an interesting question that would be interesting whether or not this particular team was ever fired. They were not lied to about the software. They just were not talking about the software. The failure is structural. The vote is cast on the headline, and the headline is the one part of the artifact that the person with the most to gain gets to write. Think about that mechanism for a second, because it is not really about one thread. On any aggregator you use, Hacker News, Reddit, the timeline on your phones, the headline is written by the submitter, and the ranking is decided in the first hour, and the first hour is precisely when nobody has checked anything. 892 points is not a measure of whether something is true. It never was. It is a measure of how many people wanted it to be. And here is the uncomfortable part. There was a set of rules covering exactly this, written years before any of it happened. Chapter 6, the rules that already covered this. Hacker News publishes its guidelines on a plain page anyone can read. 2 lines on it apply here, and both were written long before this story existed. The first, please don't use HN primarily for promotion. It's okay to post your own stuff part of the time, but the primary use of the site should be for curiosity. The second, and this is the one, otherwise please use the original title unless it is misleading or linkbait. Don't editorialize. What? The original title of the thing being submitted is Open Executive. The description underneath it is an AI-powered virtual executive team backed by 8 specialist agents. The title that was submitted instead was, CEO fired developers to make room for AI. Developers create open source AI CEO. I do not think anybody needs a ruling on whether that is editorializing. It is a 2-act narrative in 14 words about an event that appears nowhere on the page it links to. There is also a second page for exactly this situation. It is called Show HN, and it exists precisely so that people can post work they made themselves. Its rules are short and generous. Show HN is for something you've made that other people can play with. The project must be something you've worked on personally and which you're around to discuss. To post one, you begin the title with the words Show HN. Read that description again and ask yourself whether it fits. Software you made, Apache licensed. A live demo, a 4-minute video, a founder awake at 4 in the morning answering questions. That is a Show HN. That is the textbook definition of a Show HN. It would have been welcome, it would have been on topic, and the community would have engaged with it. Critically, probably because they always are, but engaged. So what does a Show HN cost you? It costs you the frame, 3 letters at the front of the title, and every reader now knows they are looking at somebody's work rather than somebody's misfortune. The votes that follow are votes on the software. I suspect it would have got a fraction of 892 points. And I suspect that is exactly the trade that was made, whether consciously or not. One more thing about this thread that I did not expect. In more than a day, with 600 comments on it, no moderator appears anywhere in it. Not to relabel it, not to note the affiliation, not to move it. I am not blaming anyone for that. The site is moderated by a very small number of humans against an enormous volume, and this story did not look like a problem. It looked like a popular thread about the future of management. Which is rather the point. The failure mode does not look like a failure, it looks like everything working. So let me put the strongest possible case for the other side, because it deserves one. Chapter 7, the fair reading. Suppose every word of it is true. A team really was let go so a company could replace them with AI. They really did regroup, form a lab, and build this. The whole thing is exactly what the headline says. Nothing I have shown you rules that out, not the June creation date. You can start a company in June and have been fired in May, not the consulting business. Displaced engineers have to eat, not the executive-friendly marketing, because the way you sell a product and the reason you built it are allowed to differ. And the disclosure was voluntary, nobody forced it. He could have said nothing at 4 in the morning and almost certainly got away with it. So here is the honest position, and it is narrower than you might want. I am not telling you the layoff is fiction. I have no evidence that it is, and I would be doing precisely what I am complaining about if I implied otherwise. What I am telling you is that it is not checkable. And that 609 comments went by without anyone requiring it to be. Those are very different accusations, and the second one is not really an accusation at all. It is a description of how the machinery works. Now there is a version of this criticism that I think is wrong, and I want to name it so you can discount it. The wrong version says, this is astroturfing, the account is fake, the whole thing is a marketing operation, and everybody involved is a cynic. I cannot support any of that. A fresh account is not a fake account. A launch is not a fraud. Selling support for open source is the oldest honest business in the industry. And the software appears to be genuinely open. Apache 2.0, self-hostable, all of it inspectable. A contributor added support for running it against local self-hosted models instead of the commercial API from their own fork. And it was merged. Whoever they are, that is a real change made in the open that makes the thing less dependent on one vendor. So what is left after you strip out everything I cannot prove? 3 things, all of them documented, none of them requiring anybody's motive to be bad. A headline that describes an event which appears in no record anywhere. A 2.5-hour gap between the framing and the disclosure, with the framing on top and the disclosure underneath. And 598 comments in which 14 mention the code and nobody opened it. That last one is not about Sente Labs at all. That one is about the rest of us. Chapter 8, where this leaves you. I would change my mind about most of this tomorrow for one document. Name the company, point at a filing, a notice, a news report, a dated announcement. Anything with a second party in it. The claim becomes true, the headline becomes accurate, and the only thing left standing is the 2.5 hours. That is the whole falsification condition, and it is deliberately cheap. It should be, one sentence would settle it. Until somebody writes that sentence, here is what the record supports. One of the 2 most discussed AI stories on Hacker News this week was a product launch wearing a grievance. It arrived through a 20-hour-old account whose only other act was one warm-up comment. And the 428 people who came to argue about it argued about the premise, not the product. Because the premise was the product. So what do you actually do with that? Not become cynical. Cynicism is just credulity pointed the other way, and it is no cheaper to be wrong in that direction. Do the small thing instead. When a headline tells you a story about people, someone was fired, someone said something, someone was replaced. Ask who is telling you and what they get if you believe it. Then open the link and see whether the link says it too. That question takes about 11 seconds. On the 27th of August, it would have taken one person 11 seconds, and the answer would have been sitting right there, because the repository never mentioned a layoff at all. One person did ask, he got nothing back. The uncomfortable part is not that a company framed its launch well. Companies do that. The uncomfortable part is that the framing worked on the single most skeptical technical audience on the internet. The one that reads the code, that is famously impossible to sell to, that will argue for 200 comments about a semicolon. 892 points. 14 mentions of the code. Nobody ran it.